Greetings and welcome to another Warhammer 40,000 Kill Team video, where today I'm going over the buffs and nerfs needed for Kill Team. But before getting into things, please remember to like and subscribe as well as comment. Let me know what you thought of today's video. And remember, I've got a Discord you can check out for free in the episode description below, an affiliate link at Element Games, an affiliate link discount code at Crossfire Games, and a Patreon if you want to give me some more support. But yeah, let's get on with today's video. So for the state of the meta, we've actually had an amazingly balanced meta of about 2 months. Like, honestly, this might have been the best state Kill Team has been in for ages, maybe ever, and it's gone. It's all gone. But we only need minor tweaks to factions. Now we just need like small buffs and nerfs, not as drastic as we needed with the last Balance Dataslate, which was the first one for the new edition. You just have to ignore Blood and Zeal. We all know Blood and Zeal is an issue, but even if Games Workshop wanted to change it now, there's not really much data to go off of, so we should just wait, right? I know most of us would love those teams to be toned down, but we have to wait. That's probably coming in 3 to 6 months' time, so just lots of pain. But hopefully we get more internal rebalancing. What I liked about the last Balance Dataslate is, like, not only did we get buffs and nerfs, we got a lot of internal rebalancing to make factions better. Like, it shows that they were more aware of the issues we had. So I'm hoping we see more of that. And then the suggestions are based partly on the stats. So obviously I've used the stats for some of the changes, as well as just general feedback from playing, as well as chatting to players to try and eliminate toxic interactions. So now I've explained everything. Remember, this is for fun. Not like any of this is going to happen. I'm not a playtester. So let's just go on and see how this would play out. So starting off with core rule changes, I would add, once again, the operatives aren't valid targets if they are within control range of enemy operatives, to represent like the to-ing and fro-ing of combat. But also it helps tidy up the fact that we have 2 mentions of valid target in 2 different places of the core rulebook, which gets a bit confusing. But that would just actually tone down a lot of abilities natively. So that would be great to see, although I don't think that would happen. Once again, improve beta decima so it's playable. There are multiple options to do this. They just have to try at least one. That would be great. I don't think we'll get any changes to beta decima, but it would be nice that Games Workshop makes it playable instead of just letting everyone continue to ignore it and leaving it in this unplayable state. Then another core change, this is more for equipment, is mines. So mines cannot overlap with other terrain equipment such as razor wire. So for the way mines are placed, they actually ignore other terrain pieces effectively. So they can't go within access points and accessible terrain. But what you can do when you do like razor wire, you can actually overlap it with the mine to make actually at least a 4-inch wall where you either are slowed down by the razor wire or run into a mine, which isn't really fair. And it kind of leads into this scenario where you can kind of build the great wall of terrain equipment, which slows down the opponent or causes them to take damage when they're just trying to move up the board. I think we have so much, we have enough tools already to slow down the opponent that you don't really need to overlap mines with other equipment. And then this is a last change to match play that I think would be really cool, but I don't think this will happen either. And that's, you only get the additional command point for going second if it was given to you, not if you choose to go second. So let's say I win the initiative and I already had priority. I go to my opponent like, you know what, you can go first, I'm going to go second, I get 2 CP. I'm not in a position where I want to alpha strike, so you can just go first. They basically did something like this with Age of Sigmar, where they changed like if you chose to go second, you didn't, if you were made to go second, you didn't get the downside of going second. And hopefully this is kind of reflected, because at the moment you're kind of incentivized to not push up too much turning point 1, and then turning point 2 you really want to go second to get that 2 CP and then punish your opponent. So that change would be really nice and make it a more tactical and less focusing on like punishing your opponent for not winning the initiative and deciding who goes first or second, because you can still make them go first. You just don't get the additional CP. You only get the additional CP if your opponent makes you go second, which I think is really cool. Going on to buffs, we have Angels of Death. Now hear me out, Angels of Death are pretty solid, but there is some internal rebalancing which would be nice, and Overall, the faction isn't doing that great. It's like borderline 45% despite how large it is. So just some minor tweaks I think would be good. So first off, just make the heavy intercessor just movement 5 instead of movement 4. It's already pretty solid, but the movement 4 is really, really impedant. And just making it movement 5 just gives it more reach and more playability when walking around the kill zone, especially as it's a 40 mil base. Just helps so much. Then for the Assault Intercessor Warriors and Intercessor Warriors, I would give them additional rules. Just because if you look at warriors from other kill teams, they all have additional rules except for Angels of Death. Now this doesn't really feel fair for this kill team considering it doesn't have too many specialists and it actually takes a lot of warriors. So I think it would be great if Assault Intercessor Warriors gain Ceaseless instead of Balance when under the effects of Assault Doctrine, and Intercessor Warriors gain Ceaseless instead of Balance when under the effects of Devastator Doctrine. So this doesn't overlap with the Tactical Doctrine, so when shooting within 6, which is actually the most common shooting for this kill team, but making it either long-range shooting with Intercessors or fighting and retaliating in melee with Assault Intercessors actually makes it really, really useful and makes your general warriors just a little bit better, because at the moment they're kind of bland. This wouldn't affect your grenadier, it wouldn't affect your captain, it wouldn't affect your sergeants, and it wouldn't affect your gunners. So this is just for the basic warriors, and I think these kind of changes would be really nice just to give a bit more diversity and reliability and flavor to Angels of Death. Now we go on to Deathcore. So I think Deathcore only need a few more buffs. But first, just increase the veteran to 4 attacks. You know I love Marvel vs. Capcom, so Bionic Arm, I just want to scream Bionic Arm as the dude walks around punching people to death. It would be so cool just making 4 attacks. But also, make gas bombardment only affect enemy operatives. For example, all the Deathcore are wearing gas masks, so why are they under the effects of their own gas bomb? That would just make it very, very cool, especially if you were like tying people up. If you placed the gas bomb aggressively and then moved into it, like especially on an opponent's point or something where you can't put on an opponent's point. But you know what I mean? Just making it not affect your own operatives makes sense because literally everyone has gas masks. And I think with that change, as well as, you know, the Bionic Arm, a Deathcore, great. They would be in a really solid, and it actually makes a lot of thematic sense. I think these are the only minor tweaks they need. Going into Exaction Squad, I actually think Exaction Squad are in a very solid place. They do need some more changes, but that's basically if we need to see them how they play. They had a really good month in January, and then February they were just, I mean, they had a really good month in February, and then March they were just okay. But the only thing I would like to see at the moment is special issue shells. The piercing 1 option just loses the 3+ save restriction, right? Just let them use it no matter what. I understand it was probably for balancing reasons, but it still just doesn't make sense to me that they'll go like, oh, only use the 3+ save against the Space Marines. Just hold them on. We can't use them against these 5 and 4+ save operatives. I think just letting them have a once per turning point piercing 1 would be so nice, especially as it would encourage you to use their abilities to grant severe more and set up when you wanted to use their key action once per turning point. Then we come to Gellerpox Infected. I've got some more buffs for them. So Drawn to the Hum, increase the range to end a move within 3 inches of an objective marker instead of being within 1. Right, because they're so slow to begin with, at least having that 3-inch radius from an objective gives more usability for Drawn to the Hum and actually means you can actually more reliably reach it, especially when you're trying to charge onto objectives. Considering most of the team is movement 5 now, this would actually make the Drawn to the Hum very useful and give you more flexibility with how you use it. And then also I would change Mutoid Vermin to just, when you select that piece of equipment, you select 4 selections for 1 equipment option, but you can no longer double it up. So you only select the equipment option once instead of twice, just because, you know, you still won't always select it, but it frees up another equipment choice for Gellerpox, which just gives them more flexibility when it comes to playing the game. I think these changes would be enough just to make them a little bit more solid without making them too oppressive or too fast. Then we come to Hernkyn Yaegirs. This is one I've actually thought about the most and tried to put a lot of stuff in to make it make sense. So, Masterful Blade Work, I would change it so it also gives +1 attack when retaliating or when fighting with a Conceal Order. This would actually mean your basic Knife Warriors would go up to 5 attacks, and your normal warriors, and including everyone else, would be 4 attacks when they're charged. well, basically when they're retaliating or when they have a conceal order. Now, this would mean your knife fighter specialist would basically always be 5 attacks, but I think that's a fair trade-off. It makes Masterful Blade Work more of a defensive tool, except for one specialist, and, you know, really sits well with how Hernkyn Yaegirs are supposed to move up into the board and just hunker down. They're not going to be too great being offensive, but they're great on the defensive, which would be really, really huge for this kill team. It means, you know, you are 4 attacks or 5 attacks with plasma knives when you're charged and people are fighting against you, but if you're charging and fighting other people, you're not getting that bonus. I think that's really, really cool. I would also make Hidden Engagement grant Ceaseless instead of Balanced. So this is when you're shooting basically from terrain. So you have cover. So because Balanced is kind of pointless, but when you're getting Ceaseless, that actually makes this ploy far more useful and more likely for you to use it. And then one more thing, I would actually give the team 1 more resourceful point, which means you get 4 per turning point max instead of 3. Now, this actually helps make their attack ops way more usable. They can actually play infiltration a lot better, but more importantly, they can do more with Seek and Destroy. They can actually more reliably play Overrun, storm objectives, and when you factor in Masterful Blade Work, they actually can now play Seek and Destroy really well as positioning against a lot of the meta. This would make Hernkyn Yaegirs so much better without having to give them recon, and makes them use more of their tools in a more thematic way. I think this would actually be really, really great and see them jump up in power immensely, even into the current meta we're going into. Now we come to Hunter Clade. It's basically the same as last time. Depreciations aren't active for the turning point for the first time they are used, but I've also added increased Rust Stalkers to 7 inches of movement, because I've been inspired by Goremongers. If their robotic legs give them +1 move, surely the same can apply to Rust Stalkers. I was considering 8-inch move for Rust Stalkers, but that basically gives them built-in optimized gate, and you could do that. And I think it's fair considering they are literally melee operatives only. The only way you can give them a shooting attack is with grenades. So I think it just makes Rust Stalkers a little bit more useful. And these buffs would just be great for Hunter Clade overall. Then for Imperial Navy Breachers, they also need buffs. So I would buff System Override Device. So instead of just being, oh, you can do the Operate Hatch action for -1 AP, I would just change it to Mission Action. Just replace Operate Hatch with Mission Action in general. Gives the team a lot more flexibility and allows them to play the points more, especially when it comes to different missions when you're playing the crit op. And then also, regrettably, I would probably let them have stims give +1 wound again. Because the issue is when you're trying to balance this team, you're trying to balance them in such a way that they get buffed but not inside Inquisitorial Agents. At least this makes them all 8 wounds again. They still have shotguns that are only 3-3, and they're still okay in melee. When they brace for counteract, they are quite annoying to deal with, but I think it makes up for their limited range and not amazing damage output they have anymore. Just makes them really tanky, and I think would make the team very, very interesting to play. Then we come to Kasrkin. Kasrkin have so many buffs. Once again, the biggest challenge with buffing Kasrkin is trying to buff them in a way that they're not just better in Inquisitor Agents, which I think these changes do. So I would change Engage from Cover to give Ceaseless saves instead of Balanced. So basically, if you're in cover and someone's shooting you, you get to reroll your defense dice of any one number, which is really good. You're probably still not using Engage from Cover that much, but you have more incentives to use it at specific scenarios. I would also change Clearance Sweep to give Ceaseless instead of Balanced. Also encourages you to use Clearance Sweep more, especially as you're hitting on freeze. With Ceaseless, that's amazing. I would also change Strike Fast to apply to charge actions too. So Strike Fast currently only gives you +1 movement when you're doing a reposition action. At least when it's giving you +1 when you're doing a charge, when you want, it just allows you to stage up more aggressively when you want to get that charge. Now it's still going to be very situational and you're effectively only going to use it against 7 wound teams and maybe some 8 wound teams, but especially later in the game when you've chipped down stuff and you need the extra movement, having Strike Fast apply on charge actions would be great and makes sense. Then for Ice in Your Veins, I would make it apply for the whole turning point instead of the first time someone shoots at you. And I'd make it work on crit damage too. So not only are you -1 normal damage, you're -1 crit damage too. Because when you're using these skillet arms, you're sacrificing something else to get rid of Severe, and this is really good. It allows Ice in your Veins to make you play more defensively if you want to, like Turning Point 2, and then you can switch to Strike Fast, Turning Point 1, or Turning Point 3 when you want to be more aggressive, and you still have your other options as well. And then finally, for foregrips, I would just increase their range from 3 inches to 6 inches. It does give them Accurate 1, and they already have Ceaseless, but it just makes foregrips more useful, and once again, this is basically a shooting-only team. They have hardly any melee, and I think making foregrips more usable and making you more reliable in shooting is a fair trade-off considering you literally have no melee. But I think with all these buffs, Kasrkin jump up. They still, I think, need more, but these are the changes I would do to make them really, really good without making them also too good in Inquisitorial agents. And this should make them more fun to play as well. They just become much better at shooting, but they also get more tools with their skillet arms. Then Pathfinders, this is exactly the same as last time. They need buffs, come on. Make high intensity marker light and target analysis optics twice per turning point. That would be amazing. And then let them do the marker light action while on guard on concealing Gallodark again. That just gives some more playability in that kill zone. Maybe a bit too strong with the Games Workshop maps, but still it's a nice change for this kill team. They're doing really badly at the moment, and at least these changes would be interesting enough to give them more synergy without relying on like cornerstones or not even getting to use their faction ability too much, considering how much setup marker lights need now for not the biggest payoff. I think this would be really, really nice for Pathfinders. Then we've got Scout Squad. I still think they need some help. I know some people are wary of them, but at the moment they're not in a great spot. I would let them to perform 7 scouting options, forward scouting options instead of 6. They already got 1. You know, they can do 6 now and it didn't really change too much. 7, I think, would be amazing. Lets them more flexibility. It does effectively give them a whole turning point of setup, but I think that's fine. It's thematic. And then for the Heavy Bolter and Missile Launcher, I would change them from Heavy Dash to Heavy Reposition. After all, these are effectively Astartes in training, and they are so muscular and quite hench that I think it would give more mobility to their heavy weapons, and it makes sense because they are Space Marines. I think that with these changes, they get a lot better at setting up and punishing the opponent with their heavy weapons. I think it's really, really cool and doesn't need them going up to 10 operatives or getting crazy, crazy knives. Then for Tempestor Aquilons, they need some buffs as well. I think they're generally in a really good spot, but I've been saying that for ages and it hasn't been reflected in competitive play at all. So what I would do is effectively Sudden Offensive lets you choose when to use your rerolls instead of having to use them with each operative first. So for example, let's say you have 5 rerolls. Instead of the first 5 operatives having to use it, you get to choose when to use it 5 times during the turning point. It makes it more usable and makes sense because you're basically Spec Ops, right? It makes sense you would choose when to use your rerolls instead of just going, run in guys, run in and gun, because that's not how the game is played at the moment. I would also allow drop markers to work through Gallodark walls, considering that on a lot of Gallodark maps, the Aquilon drop markers are actually hemmed back by the walls because they can't be placed under them. They have to be placed on either side. At least clarifying that drop markers allow Aquilons to drop through walls as long as the marker is nearby, I think just makes them a lot more playable on that kill zone. And then also I would give them a 3rd drop marker. So this is just an interesting tidbit, but if you look at the equipment tokens you get with each kill team, some of them have more than that you can use, which clearly means at some point in time, for example, with Aquilons, they have 3 drop markers, but you only use 2, which means at one point they had 3. And basically, I'm not saying they get to drop in the 3rd turning point, but what I would do is let them have 3 drop markers. They lose 1 at the end of turning point 1, sorry, and then they lose both at the end of turning point 2. What this means is now you, instead of turning point 1, you cover the whole board with your drop markers when you're moving up, and then turning point 2, you cover 2 avenues, and then you can still switch one to basically cover all lanes as you need. It just gives them more abilities to stage and makes the opponent respect you more than they already do. Now, I don't think this would do much in terms of like massively jacking up their power, but I would be very like when you come to buffing Aquilons, I think you have to do it slowly, step by step, because if you buff them too much and like, for example, letting them drop even in the 3rd turning point, they become way too oppressive to play. So I think you have to go up slowly without jacking their power up too quickly. But these changes would be pretty good, I think. Then we come to Vespid Stingwings. So there's a lot of change for these insects, so they're not the worst team in the game. I would increase their melee to 4 attacks because they have no melee specialists, but they are very big insects. They have mandibles. Just make them 4 attacks. They're still 4 attacks here on 4's 3/4, but it lets them be more reliable, especially with all their melee buffs that they have. Then I would increase their movement to 7 inches because they are supposed to be pretty fast. And remember, because they can't go to free APL, you don't have to worry about them having a 12-inch threat range. They can't reposition dash shoot. They would just reposition and shoot, which actually gives them a 9-inch threat range when it comes to shooting, because they can move 7 and shoot within 2. That actually helps a lot with them being 2 APL, and I think is very fair for the kill team. Then I'd also make the drone is expendable, so the drone doesn't count towards the kill op. So for the kill op, even though it's a 10 operative team, it would be 9 operatives, which mirrors how these support operatives works in other kill teams. And then also, all instances of accurate 1 and accurate 2 are switched to balanced and ceaseless. This means you're more likely to proc your devastating 2 and makes the kill team more useful overall. It does actually make them less accurate, but you're more likely to proc the dev 2, which is more important and feels better. And then for the Sky Torch Blaze, well, for the Sky Torch, I'd make it Blaze, so everyone hit will take D3 damage when they activate, and I'd also increase the Flamer to 4/4 damage. It loses out on the the devastating damage, but also doesn't really do that much damage with its short range. At least with a 7-inch move, you're more likely to trigger Sky Torch itself, and just being 4/4 makes it more useful instead of just going, well, I'm just going to take a general warrior instead. Now, these are a lot of buffs, and Vespid have been buffed quite heavily, and I think they need all these buffs. And then after all these buffs, I think they actually become really reliable, because then you literally can just start swarming the opponent and going like accurate, or you can do like balanced and ceaseless spam just to like shred opponents. I think that would be really fun and make them more interesting to play. Now we come on to the mid section. These kill teams are mid, but also they need buffs, but also some nerfs. So starting off with Hierotek Circle, first I would buff the Techno Monster back to healing 3d3. It means the Techno Monster is more viable and actually offsets the poor healing of the kill team when operatives die, making it, more attractive to take. And then this is a nerf, but it's more like tidying up a toxic interaction. So Cortical Control, the command point that lets you pick an ability with no range limitation, doesn't work on Time Splinter. So Time Splinter is the teleportation. So that basically means you can't spend a CP to pick anyone who's visible and then teleport them anywhere else on the board. I think just tidying that up makes it more enjoyable to play into Hierotek Circle without being a feel bad, because especially when you're playing on open, the teleportation is kind of a bit too crazy and unfun interaction. So just tidying up makes it fairer for everyone as a whole. Then Brood Brothers, they need technically a nerf, but I would also like to buff them in some way as well. So first off, I'd buff the Patriarch. I'd make the Patriarch's melee damage 5/7, and that the Patriarch can ignore all modifiers, so it doesn't get injured, you can't change its APL stat, ignoring all of that. So effectively it's 5 attacks, hitting on freeze, 5/7 rending relentless, which means you're actually more inclined to take the Patriarch. I thought about giving it lethal 5-up, but then I think on top of relentless, that's way too much. But it means like you can actually have the Patriarch just charge Marines, and then if you roll a crit, you can actually kill a Marine in 2 strikes. It gives you a tool against melee teams, and it'll just make the Patriarch more usable, because at the moment you just don't really use it. And then the nerf I would add to this kill team, because they have overperformed for the overall of Quarter 1, is just Ruthless Coordination cannot be used turning point 1. So Ruthless Coordination is shooting someone, but you measure valid target from within 2 inches of, you measure valid target from another friendly operative. So what you do is because you are 12 activations, you activate your opponent. You second to last activation, after you've used a covert guise on any operative, you've usually used the free scouting option to make your -2 for climbing free. So you have someone move up 3 inches with covert guises, then you have someone reposition and dash 9 inches, so that's 12 inches up the board, which will punish any opponent moving who's moved up. And then as long as you end within 2 inches of someone, you can then spend a CP to shoot that operative with Ruthless Coordination and effectively get a turning point 1 shot, which once again goes against everything Games Workshop has set out as their design principles for this new edition of Kill Team, and just eliminates a feel bad, because once again, shooting turning point 1 in this way shouldn't really be allowed, and it punishes you trying to stage. But because it's literally a 12-inch move with a 14-inch threat range, it punishes you moving out your drop zone. So they just need to get rid of that because the kill team doesn't really need it. It's very solid. And with these changes, like, you lose the ability to use Ruthless Coordination turning point 1, but you've now got a much better Patriarch, especially when you're into those key melee teams. Then we've got Chaos Cult. They have been overperforming, and even though it's been a low number of players, the team has found out to be, like, once again, quite toxic because it's been buffed too severely. So my change would basically be you either you can only make 1 torment per turning point, or Fervent Onslaught goes back to accurate 1 instead of giving accurate 2. Because the issue is when you have 2 torments, turning point 2 with accurate 2 and ceaseless, they just shred pretty much everything and it becomes pretty unfun to play. I think Games Workshop needs to decide if they want to make torments really killy again and spammable, or if they want to make them more if they want to make them spammable or more killy. So if you wanted to make them more killy, you leave them at 1 per turning point, but they retain the accurate 2 because they're supposed to be these hulking gigantic beasts. But if you want to tone them down but still leave them as quite a swarmy like force, you let them make up to 2 torments per turning point or whatever. Actually remove the limit so you can make as many torments as you can, up to 3, but they go back down to accurate 1. I think they need to just pick 1 and either option would be fine. I'm more of a fan of 1 torment per turning point, but they're accurate 2, but we'll see how that plays out. I think they just need this tweak and then the team is fine. It just eliminates all toxicness from the team. Then we come to Corsair Voidscarred. They've actually been fine, but they have a lot of, let's say, problematic interactions, which aren't game-breaking, but these changes would be enough to tone them down to mirror other factions and just make them a bit fairer to play into, more of like an internal rebalancing. So first off, Warding Shield would only negate normal damage instead of negating normal damage and critical damage. So it just makes, the Eldari a little less survivable, but also mirrors how it works for Blades of Cain with their Jester Scratch and other factions, excluding Goremongers. I think it's fine considering all the defensive tools Corsair Voidscarred have already, and then also the Shade Runner cannot teleport through Gallodark walls. Look, I love teleporting the Shade Runner through Gallodark walls, but it's like very thematic, but it's completely unfair and not very fun for the opponent, especially as you can keep like slicing to move halfway through a wall, dash, like cut someone and then finish your move back inside the wall so they can't punish you. I think just tweaking that would make the team a little bit fairer to play into while still remaining really, really strong. They can still do all that teleporting shenanigans on open, but just not on Gallodark. Makes it an even playing field for everyone else. Then we come to Fellgor Ravager. Look, just literally, just give me this. Just let Frenzy only trigger from ready operatives. So Frenzy doesn't trigger when you're expended. I just keep repeating myself, but I actually think Frenzy is fine if you haven't activated your operative, because it's supposed to give you a second go. So at least if you're ready, that's when Frenzy will trigger. I mean, it's useless when it's your own activation because you still die at the end of your own activation, but it means if your opponent tries to alpha strike you or try to go for your readied operatives first, you still get a go, and they actually are incentivized to either wait you out and go for your expended operatives or just risk it. So their team would still be really, really good, but no longer this massive roadblock that gatekeeps a lot of factions out of the game. Then we come to Hearthkyn Salvager. They actually do need some nerfs. They have a very problematic interaction with the game at the moment that does make them overly toxic to play into when they're already a strong faction. So it's just the Jump Pack Warrior. The Jump Pack Warrior needs to go down to a 6-inch move instead of 8 inches, and it cannot use fly when it dashes. Because the issue is you reposition scouting option this guy up into the middle of the board, so he's already up 3 inches, then you give him +1 APO and then you outweigh the opponent, and then you reposition and dash with fly 11 inches, and then you have a crack grenade with a threat range of an additional 2, so 13-inch range crack grenade. And then you win initiative, and then you do it all again. So it's kind of too good, and as you've seen with what I've been trying to do with these buffs and nerfs, is try to eliminate like unfair turning point 1 aggression and like these kind of toxic interactions. The Jump Pack Warrior would still be good with a 6-inch move with fly, and a lot of other operatives that fly can't do it when they dash. This just makes the kill team less faster than it should be, because currently the kill team's like very static, and then all of a sudden you have the rocket guy going, I'm Sonic, I'm pure speed. So that helps tone down the jump pack warrior from being insane. And then I'd also change Writ of Claim, so it only adds +1 to the initiative for each objective you control. So you remove the part about contesting objectives, and this helps minimize this really silly alpha strike, right? So it stops Hearthkyn Salvagers getting like +4 to the initiative. And it also makes sense because they're trying to claim the objective, not contest it, right? So, for example, if they now want to do the Alpha Strike thing, they have to play a bit more honest with their kill team, and also they now need to control objectives. So if opponents are contesting the mid, you're only getting +1, which means this, you know, consistently toxic Alpha Strike stuff doesn't always trigger, and you actually have to learn how to play the game in a different way. It still means this, the faction's still really strong with its grudge mechanics and its shooting and its resilience. This just stops this, like, generally silly turning point 1 alpha strike that then leads into a turning point 2 alpha strike where it can just like decimate part of your team for just simply trying to stage up the board. Then we come to Plague Marines. I think Plague Marines just need a minor tweak, just a minor nerf, nothing major, and it's just Plague Bells. I would make Plague Bells only ignore the movement modifiers for being injured instead of the way it works now where they completely ignore all downsides to being injured. This is just because the kill team is already quite resilient enough as it is, and I feel it's more thematic and makes more sense narratively that Plague Bells only work for movement, you know, because it just shows that even when injured, Nurgle will still eventually get you. Because, you know, they still benefit from their ceaseless, and it mirrors the other weakness Chaos teams need, where it's just like what Warpcoven has. They're still actually vulnerable to being injured, and I think that would be fine. It's not a huge change, but I think it's just a minor tweak just to make the kill team a little bit less oppressive and reward you more as the opponent for actually injuring and being offensive into the Plague Marines. Then we've got Ratlings. This is technically a nerf, but it's more once again synergizing with the mine change I would like to see. So tripwires cannot be set up within accessible or access points or other terrain features, because currently you can set up tripwires next to accessible terrain as well as next to access points on Gallowdark, which makes it really toxic because remember, the moment you open the door and walk into them, you're -1 APL until the end of your next activation, and then you stop your movement. So it makes it really hard to actually apply any sort of pressure and eliminates the toxic great wall of terrain that Ratlings can build to just stop you getting into their lines. And it just makes them fairer to play into. They're already a really good kill team, and this change just makes them less toxic to play into. It is a nerf, but as I said, it's more just a general interaction to tidy up how mines actually work and interact with other terrain features. And then finally we come to Warpcoven. They're still doing really, really well. They still need nerfs. So the way you would nerf Warpcoven is boons must be chosen like chapter tactics, i.e. you cannot switch between them each game. They have to be the same for the entire tournament. This just makes them fairer. And then also Capricious Plan cannot be used with Temporal Flux. So this is your teleport. So you basically can't reposition 6 inches forward. Then you can't like move forward, like let's say dash forward to shoot someone and then spend a CP with Capricious Plan to dash back, switch to conceal, and then use the teleport to teleport back 6 inches. So effectively you reposition and dash 9 inches, shoot someone, and then teleport back 9 inches for a CP. Just remove that interaction. It makes Capricious Plan still good, but also eliminates the toxic element with Temporal Flux. And then also a light change to valid target from visible. Considering it gives ceaseless, I know it used to be relentless, but just change it to valid target instead of visible. And I think with these changes, Warpcoven is still amazing, but they lose a little bit of their harassment again, and their flexibility, and their damage output, which they clearly need from results. They're still doing amazingly well and are arguably the best elite kill team. So for the buffs and nerfs overview, remember the game was in a really good state mostly. It was great, and I'll stand by saying this was probably the best the game has ever been in. Just ignore Blood and Zeal. Look, Blood and Zeal is going to be very problematic for the meta. We're already seeing the ramifications, and it's only going to get worse, but we have to ignore it. We can't use anything. We've got a balanced Dataslate hopefully coming at the end of April, and there's no chance it's going to use Blood and Zeal. Like, just ignore that. We just have to accept what's coming. It's very thematic. And currently, we still only need minor tweaks and some more internal rebalancing. if you look through what I've suggested, the only big changes are, apart from Warpcoven, who got the most nerfs, again, it's actually lots of teams are getting more buffs, and I think that's all we really need at the moment. Just some minor tweaks, killing the like weird interactions with mines and terrain, just making like those Alpha Strike abilities just disappear turning point 1, so you can still use them turning point 2, 3, and 4, but just to make turning point 1 a little bit safer for everyone instead of some teams being able to abuse it. And then, yeah, you know, the meta is currently pretty varied, and with these changes, we just see more variety, and we wouldn't see any one faction settle to the top, ignoring Blood and Zeal. And, you know, this would be really nice. Just literally ignore Blood and Zeal. So it'll be interesting to see what Games Workshop does. As I said, I actually really like the last balance data slate. I like that they addressed internal balance as well as just buffing and nerfing stuff. So hopefully we see more of the same. And I'm really optimistic. At least, you know, ignoring Blood and Zeal. I say it a lot, but I know a lot of people are upset about where the game is. Like, I agree as well. But when it comes to balance, you literally have to ignore it because it's very unlikely these teams will get nerfed in the first the first 3 months. Maybe even we have to wait 6 months, but I doubt we will. But yeah, you know, I'm hopeful. Hopefully we get some of these changes. I'm not a playtester. Remember, these were just for fun, right? They probably won't happen. I mean, only some of mine happened last time. It's fine. It's just for fun. And yeah, but that's pretty much it from me today. Please remember to like and subscribe as well as comment. Let me know what you thought of today's video. What do you think of the buffs and nerfs? Is there anything I'd missed out, and what would you like to see? And remember, I've got a Discord you can check out for free in the episode description below, an affiliate link at Elman Games, an affiliate link and Discord code at Crossfire Games, and a Patreon if you want to give me some more support. I'm just going to quickly shout out my patrons. So for my adepts of the crit, I have Tom, the Houston Toad, Super Cow, Sam, Nick, Mercenary Q, Mr. Meatwad, Marshall, Lucas, Jeremiah, Graham, Fangzu, Draken, Dave Meatswell, Dan, Dada Golden's Chris, and then Amorphium. So thank you so much for all your support. It really means a lot to me and helps support the channel. But yeah, this is another fun video. We should have a balanced data slate at the end of the month. I'm currently painting through a bunch of teams. I'm trying to finish off my Angels of Death, Sanctifiers, maybe finish off my new Hand of the Archon. It's just, yeah, you know, getting down to some kill team hobby and seeing where the game settles. Trying to get some more games in, seeing if I can have a chance with Angels of Death. But I'm just really optimistic to see what happens with this balanced data slate. It's going to be really fun, I think, you know. Literally just trying to ignore the big elephants in the room, especially the elephant that's in your face turning point 1. But remember, no matter what happens when it comes to buffing and nerfing your own factions, there's always a chance to win as long as you can roll a crit.